It's my pleasure to be here with you. It is something I look forward to seeing, a talent that I don't always see in the real world, and I know you know that as well as I do. With that, counsel ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel ready on this side?
Yes, Your Honor.
Jaden Sinclair has pleaded not guilty to this offense, and as I'm sure you know, is to be presumed innocent. For you to find her guilty, the prosecution must prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. If we, the defense, can show you that someone other than Jaden Sinclair could have committed this crime, that will constitute reasonable doubt, and you must then acquit my client. Both Morgan Kincaid and Jaden Sinclair had an equal opportunity to commit this crime. Despite this, Detective Shay Reynolds allowed Morgan Kincaid to leave the country, where she is now unreachable, and my client sits before you as the defendant today.
Let's stop here and let's review this information and this difficult case for the jury so that when everyone is clear. A part of your theory, Detective, is that my client drugged Kieran Sophie, correct?
Yes, sir.
Placed the kidnapped victim in the trunk of her own car, correct?
Yes, the victim was found in Jaden Sinclair's car at Jaden Sinclair's home.
Sent a ransom note from her own traceable PDA, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then calmly waited for you, the police, to arrive.
I don't think that Jaden Sinclair calmly waited.
Right. Now, Detective, I understand that it seems like you've done pretty good investigation. You seem like you're pretty smart about this. So, Detective, does all of this sound like the sophisticated plot by some criminal mastermind?
Yes, it does.
It does? All the circumstantial evidence? Or maybe just a clumsy frame-up by a jealous teenager?
No. I did interview Morgan Kincaid fully, and I found no evidence linking this to Morgan Kincaid. My investigation was full and complete.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
Morgan will be the most likely one to know where Karen was, is that correct?
Yes, Morgan was very good friends with Karen.
Right, and Morgan Kincaid told you that Karen had left the party.
Objection, Your Honor. This is hearsay.
Your Honor, we are not offering this particular question for the truth of the matter. We're merely trying to point out the conflict between the two prosecution's witnesses' stories. As you will see, Cleo Tawfiq will testify that Morgan Kincaid told her one thing, while at a later time in this trial, Detective Reynolds will testify that Morgan Kincaid told her something entirely contradicting. This illustrates the dishonesty of Morgan Kincaid, showing that she is a possible suspect in this case.
Your Honor, this is still an out-of-court statement that I believe is being offered for the truth of the matter. This is still a hearsay remark, and that is not an exception.
Okay, we're going to allow the question. Thank you.
So, Mr. Tawfiq, Morgan Kincaid told you that Karen had left the party before she did, meaning Morgan was the last to leave. Is that correct?
Yes, she said this, and she seemed almost as shocked as I was.
Right. We'll come back to this at a later time in this trial, but for now we'll move on.
The defense calls Karen Tawfiq to the witness stand.
This is not working out.
May I proceed?
You may.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Karen Tawfiq, and I'm 18 years old.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, recently I attended the Norman High School. Currently, I live in a small studio apartment and work at the local J-Mart as a cashier.
Your mom testified about your involvement with Flex as being abnormal. Could you tell the jury about your involvement with this group?
Well, I joined Lex during my senior year, and I can honestly say that the lessons I've learned in Lex will stay with me forever.
Were you and Morgan still close after you and Jaden got close?
We still hung out, but she seemed a little distant. She seemed a little bit jealous of how close me and Jaden got.
Objection, Your Honor. An improper conclusion that Morgan was jealous.
Your Honor, she's merely giving her opinion based on her observation. She has interacted with Morgan. She was her best friend. I think she has improper opinion to give her opinion based on her observations of Morgan Kincaid.
We'll allow it. It's all right.
Could you continue?
She just seemed a bit jealous as far as me and Jaden's relationship. I especially noticed this when Jaden gave me the position of Chancellor of Lex.
around 2 a.m., Morgan came in, and eventually she left, and I just went back to sleep.
Now, Jaden, how can you explain the evidence that the police have against you?
Well, of course my fingerprints were on my own car. I mean, I guess that proves it was my car. I didn't even know Karen's email address. We only ever really spoke by phone. My PDA's been lost for months, and no one's been able to locate it. And as far as GHB goes, I don't know what it is, let alone how or when it got into my den.
Could you describe your financial situation to the jury?
Sure. My finances are fine. I'm in the process of moving around assets and investing in companies. If I need any additional funds, I can do accounting work. Most of my money goes to charity.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with Exhibit 11.
You may.
Do you recognize this?
Yes, this is a $20,000 check that I wrote for charity to the Circle of Hope.
Your Honor, I ask that this be entered into evidence and published to the jury.
I would object to the relevancy of this exhibit.
Your Honor, prosecution contends that my client committed this crime, which was made for a ransom, and they tried to speak about her financial situation as not being too good. She just explained that her assets were fine and she gave money to charity, and this check just proves that she did indeed write checks to homeless shelters and food banks.
May I respond, Your Honor? Whether or not this witness gave money to a charity would not make the charge of kidnapping more or less probable. It would actually be more prejudicial than probative for the jury to hear of her charitable donations.
I'm assuming this was given at some point after the event.
Yes. No, this was given a little bit before the event. This was given before the event, and this just shows that my client was not in a financial need for money.
Given the testimony about the investigation of her finances, we'll allow it.
So let's review the case against my client, Jaden Sinclair. The prosecution's witnesses present Lex as an abnormal group and my client as his charismatic leader. But in reality, the nature of this club, Lex, is not even pertinent to the charges for which my client is on trial. So why did they spend so much time on this? Well, it was in order to engage you in their prejudices. The same prejudices that brought my client to trial. Cleo Tawfiq believed that she had lost her daughter long before the events of May 19th, and she blamed Jaden Sinclair for that. In Cleo's mind, my client was already the kidnapper. Case closed. Detective Reynolds brought her own prejudice into this case, so much so that she really didn't investigate that other person who had access to everything in Sinclair's home. Morgan Kincaid. Just one cursory conversation satisfied her, and Morgan Kincaid was allowed to leave the country. So let's look at the actual kidnapping. The prosecution contends that Jaden Sinclair's motive was money. Now, she needed $250,000 to acquire this new club center for Lex, but she started this club. She believed in it. Yet they want you to believe that she kidnapped one of her own members to get ransom money for that club center? Most of the money pouring out of my client's pockets went to charitable donations. So the motive for this crime would then be what? To maintain a certain level of charitable giving? Does that make sense to you? Not only did Morgan Kincaid have the means and the opportunity to commit this crime, but look at what actually happened. Kieran is traumatized. Jaden Sinclair, my client, is charged with a serious crime. Morgan Kincaid had means, opportunity, and a motive that makes sense. That is reasonable doubt. Without prejudice, we ask that you look at the evidence guided by your own experience, judgment, and common sense, and find my client, Jaden Sinclair, not guilty. Thank you.
I believe the jury has reached a verdict, and I'll ask, it wasn't actually a juror, but our president, Andrew Susko, is serving as foreman, and he's going to announce the winner.
The jury has reached its verdict. The winning team for the 2008 mock trial state competition in Pennsylvania is the defense, Overbrook.